So hey everyone, my name is Genesis Bond. For Techsgiving, I am the Director of Social Engagement. I joined about, I guess, at the beginning of the pandemic, and I host our Tech Talk Tuesdays and various other things that involve social engagement. I'm a software engineer, and up until, I guess now, like 5 weeks ago, I was working at Meta, but I was part of those huge layoffs. So I'm really excited about talking about diversity, of course, in the wake of incredible amounts of layoffs and the recession at this time. So yeah, I guess that's a little bit about me. I'm from New York, born and raised, and I love DC. And I'm really excited to continue with the sessions in person with you all tomorrow. So Willie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely, Genesis. Thank you so much. So, hi everyone. I'm Willie. I am a manager at Netflix on the Inclusive Recruiting Programs team. I've been with the company now for about 2 years, and I'm a remote worker based here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I former to actually joining Netflix. I was at Facebook for like 5.5 years. I don't know if we met. I'm like, wait a minute, you're at Meta. Um,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. I actually I will probably never ever really call it Meta, just the
Yeah,
Facebooker
same.
old school, if you will, in a sense. It's kind of hard to call it Meta, but either way, definitely spent a number of years in tech now at this point, probably over 7 or 8 years in tech. Spent some time at other companies outside of tech as well too. And yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation as well and talk about some of the things that perhaps we can do as a community to move us forward through some of these challenging times.
Someone said so meta for you both to work at Meta. That's funny. Uh, um, okay, let's see. Where is? I don't want to start the heavy hitting questions with Tina here. Let me message her one more time. Mm, okay, you know what? I have some questions that are intentionally directed towards you. So since there's so many people here, I don't want to, you know, keep everyone waiting.
Let's jump
So,
in.
all right, let's, hop in, no pun intended, right? So the title of this, thank you for the people who talked about the phrase, but we'll talk about that later. Anyways, so the title of this session is called Where Do We Stand? Big Tech's Commitment to Diversity During the Downturn. Many people who are in this session are millennials like myself, and I personally never thought that, I guess so early in my career, I'd have to deal with such financial strife, if you will, especially working in tech. It's supposed to be like the holy grail for a lot of people. A lot of my comp when I was, gainfully employed at Meta was stock, and now that's worth significantly less than what I was, than my offer and things like that. So I think a lot of us are readjusting to the economic status at the moment. I'm going to mute my phone. Sorry about that. But a question that I have, because obviously we're going to jump around a little bit because I want to wait for our other panelists to join before I ask the overarching questions. But a question I had specifically for you was that you attended an HBCU, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to know the importance, and how intentional it is for recruiting Black students from HBCUs as opposed to PWIs, for people like myself who went to PWIs. What's the difference there?
Yeah, that's a great question to start out with. So just for context, what's up, Chanel? I see you. So I went to Florida A&M University for both undergraduate and graduate school. So I will say that it was definitely an amazing experience. It's a once in a lifetime experience going to an HBCU. Nothing against PWIs, but HBCU life is like it's different, y'all. It's special. It's special in many ways, and so. I will say that I actually was very intentional about going to FAMU and being in business school because during the time that I'm a little bit outside of the millennial space, but when I was in school, you didn't have a lot of at that time. You didn't have like a lot of companies really trying to like hire a lot of Black and brown people. I'm just going to be straight up with you, And so unless you just got lucky in many ways with going to some of the right schools and obviously getting the right connections and being able to make those opportunities happen for yourself. And so in many ways, when I was on campus, this is when we saw a lot of companies really being a little bit more intentional about their efforts to try to hire more Black talent, for their organizations. And so what better way to do that is going to HBCU, of course, to be able to grab a lot of talent from these different schools. And so for me, I think what was really special about it was that there was this community feeling that we were able to create. And have this already sort of like developed safe space that a lot of times we don't have in the companies we work for now. And just being able to have that, hey, Tina, being able to, we still can't hear your audio.
Yeah. No, we still can't. Damn. Oh no. All right. Hopefully this gets fixed soon. I'm messaging her too.
Okay, no problem.
But we
I'll
can
keep
continue.
going. So yeah, so essentially, what we've seen with a lot of companies is that they recognize that clearly diversity is important to their organization and being able to have better business results, and thus started doing a lot more recruiting on HBCUs because clearly the talent pool was much larger than that of PWI. And so that's one of the great things that really stood out. But also, as I was talking about, is the community piece. I think that a lot of times, because we were sort of like on the same journey together as one family, because we're all kind of like in the HBCU, we already knew the struggle. We knew there was going to be challenges that we would have to face. And the resilience, I believe, that we built was super helpful for us to be able to thrive in these organizations, be able to fit into majority organizations and know how to navigate some of these headwinds and be successful. And what I've seen was that a lot of times these companies would lean on alumni to be able to help them go back and increase the representation, and so, like, for example, I went to Citibank, for example, starting out my career, and got a chance to go back on campus several times to actually bring in other FAMUans and other HBCU individuals from other schools to be able to join these companies. And I think that a lot of it was more so ingrained in me as my duty as a Black professional, as an HBCU graduate, to be able to go back and give back and bring up more of our people within these organizations. And so I think you get that a little bit with the PWIs, and I didn't go to PWI, so I can't speak to that. Genesis, you might be able to speak to that, but I will say that it was very much intentional for us, easier for us to be able to build a recruiting strategy, go back to HBCUs and grab a diversity of amazing Black talent to be able to help these organizations grow and be impactful in their journey. So I would say that's probably the biggest difference. Beyond that, I think we still obviously very much share similar experiences because the struggle is real. We still have to prove ourselves in these places, no matter where you come from, PWI or HBCU. You still have to earn your recognition. You have to earn your bonuses and all these things and stuff. So the Black experience, yes, it's varied, but at the same time, very much connected to very similar challenges, as well as opportunities for us to be able to hire more of us for these different institutions.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I went to Duke for undergrad, and upon being out of school for a couple of years, I'm meeting so many people, and I have to say that some of the most confident and strong Black people in the workforce that I know are from HBCUs. I feel like a lot of fellow people, especially people who went to Duke, like me, it was like we're getting beat up. You know what I'm saying? All the time. So I feel like it's really nice to have that community. Whenever I do have kids, I'm gonna try to plant seeds for them to go to HBCUs and definitely not to Duke, but neither here nor there. Something that I wanted to mention was that you brought up was the fact that you worked at Citibank for VP of campus recruiting, right? And then at Meta for some time as a diversity program manager, and now at Netflix. I wanted to chat with you about the differences that you've seen between these big tech companies and also a major bank for intentionally recruiting not even diverse candidates, actually Black candidates specifically, and Latino candidates. Now that I've been at Meta and no longer have, I was a part of a small team of engineers and recruiters. We started something called Blocks, which was basically intended for Black students entering college, because we do a lot of talking about, okay, well, we're doing these intentional recruitment of Black people. Can you say something? Damn. Oh no. I really don't know what to do. I'm going to have somebody on our team reach out and figure out maybe if they can do a breakout session and see if your microphone can work with that. Okay. Or for actually people are listening. So IO, for anyone else, can you please reach out to Tina and see how to help her with this? Thank you. Okay, so yes, I was a part of a small team. We started a summer camp, which was actually really nice, completely free, bought the students laptops, gave them small scholarships to have an actual professor teach them the basics of computer science, so that I guess in 4 years, there's a bigger applicant pool to pull from. Right? Do you guys feel, or do you feel like there are initiatives like that more in tech or more in banking, or what have you seen so far?
Yeah, I think the pendulum has swung a little bit in many ways, back and forth between tech and non-tech industries, if you will, in a sense. So a lot of the intentionality of hiring more underrepresented talent, particularly Black and Latinx talent, I think really started more so in non-tech industry. So coming from banking, for example, we were very intentional about the different programs we put in place, mentorship opportunities, recruiting on HBCU campuses, as well as HSIs as well too. And
is HSI? I'm sorry.
Historically serving Spanish institutions.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, Hispanic serving institutions, historically Hispanic serving institute. I got to get that right. My apologies. So essentially, very much intentional early on with like a lot of the banking companies and consumer product goods organizations really being intentional about going on campuses and really trying to help accelerate the diversity within organizations. And then as tech started coming up, of course, it started being more of a viable opportunity for all of us. You saw that pendulum swing towards the spotlight on tech, and tech recognizing that once that pressure got put on them by a lot of external companies, organizations, by the way, like NAACP, Color of Change, many others who really started to dig into when these diversity reports started to be released and recognized like, wait a minute, we got a problem here. Like y'all not representative as you should be with our people, what's going on? So it was a big push, obviously, to do more intentional work to try to diversify these organizations. So you got the boot camps, you got the again, intentional recruiting on campuses, you had the investments and sponsorships and opportunities like this, right? To tap in to be a sponsor of Thanksgiving, for example, right? You have all these great opportunities to now really be more intentional about where your dollar is going, to really invest in trying to diversify your organization. Now, granted, there's been some hit or miss moments in regards to getting that right and or getting it wrong, quite frankly. And I think that the pressure that has been continuously put on the tech industry from external organizations, media outlets, has been rightfully so in many ways to be able to hold them accountable in regards to like, hey, are you just talking the talk? Or are you really walking the walk? And what we're seeing now, of course, is really a challenging moment within tech to see how they're going to stand up for not only people of color, but just in general, like how do we go forward as an organization? How do we go forward as an industry? Because right now things are really tough with the economy. But up until this point, there's been very much intentional efforts, but I think a lot of it is because we as a community have really kept that pressure on organizations to recognize like, you got to do more. Like you just can't say we're going to commit a certain number of dollars, if you will, and not really have any credibility behind that with your actions, you know? So don't just talk the talk, walk the walk with what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think we've seen that. And now we're seeing it again with other industries that are actually going back into that pendulum swinging with their efforts being very intentional with like their hiring and recruiting on campuses as well too, but also giving back to the community. So small businesses investments, all these amazing sponsorships and dollars that are being now invested into our community. So it's a really good thing for us. It's just a matter of how do we take advantage of it? And that's something that I think got to continue to work on.
Awesome. So that actually brings up something that I didn't write this down in our preparation of questions, just so you know, just thinking. So when I was first hired from Meta, I was hired as a rotational software engineer. And upon, working there for a couple of years and talking with people, that was supposed to be some sort of program to help sort of counteract implicit bias when it comes to these big tech companies. That being said, it was a program where you have a year basically to get a promotion for people who are not new grads, but are not, I guess, haven't been in the industry for long enough. And I wanted to know how important you think it is to have programs like that for people who may not have like a name brand prior experience to break into tech. Do you feel like it's almost impossible to break into, from working from a small company or not really as a software engineer or something like that, to be able to work into these FANG companies? What have you seen to help people get their foot in the door?
Yeah, I'll just be real with you. I think it's hard. I mean, many times you just got to be very lucky. I hate to say that just because this is family, so I'm just going to be real. But I do feel like a lot of times it's got to be lucky. You got to have connections. You got to know certain people. You got to hope you get a referral. You got to hope that at that networking event, that recruiter that you talk to is going to stay connected with you throughout your journey and make sure that they're your ambassador, they're your ally. They're making sure that you actually get through the process. Then if you get through the process, or if you go through the process, you successfully get through the process, because there's a lot of bias that happens in that as well too. So there's a lot of hurdles, there's a lot of obstacles, quite frankly, that make it not as easy as we would all like for it to be when it comes to getting our foot in the door. And I do think that, again, there have been a lot of great efforts amongst a lot of people like myself and others who are either on the recruiting teams or within the business that are champions of diversity and again are trying to break down the systems that exist that make it hard for us to really break into tech or other industries for that matter. So I think in many ways, you have to recognize like those opportunities that make it hard sometimes, and are those opportunities that make it that are seen as you being fortunate or lucky or blessed in many ways. You gotta lean into those. So how do you expand your network? So we're all here today, for example. I hope that all of you are making connections through this amazing conference, this summit that we're having, because you never know. Genesis, for example, I might have a connection for you, for example, right? At Netflix. I mean, I'm just gonna throw it out there. We should talk after this, by the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and so making those, making those, and I'm serious about that. Like, this is what it's about. It's about making those connections. Like, why should other people have connections and be able to take advantage of it? We should have that same opportunity. So, we need to look out for each other, help each other up, and also recognize that we need to make sure we build these networks that help us get our foot in the door. But also, we got to make sure we're taking advantage of these opportunities that show up. A lot of companies, again, have entry-level programs, boot camps, other ways for you to really kind of build your skills, build your experience, get into the door. And it might not be necessarily your first opportunity. It might not be necessarily your ideal opportunity you're looking for. But the reality is that you got to start somewhere. Like I wasn't necessarily looking for banking, quite frankly, but I had to start somewhere. It was an opportunity that was in front of me. And I took it, I leveraged it in a way that was going to help me accelerate my career. And I have taken off since that point, and so I think we also have to be a little less selective. And quite frankly, with what we're going through right now, I think we have to, sadly, unfortunately, be less selective, because the reality of it is that, some of these opportunities are not out there as they once were. So we just got to be a little bit less selective as well.
I think, one, there aren't as many opportunities, and two, there's just so many people. There's so many candidates now, I think this year, 90,000 people have been laid off from their roles just to 2022 alone. So that kind of, actually, I'll speak, especially since we don't have our second panelist. I feel like I'm just going to do panel and.
I like that. Go for it. Yes.
Okay. So what you were saying about taking opportunities and not being incredibly selective really stood out to me. For my career personally, I went to Duke, but like my GPA was absolute trash. Duke was like, it was a struggle for me to get out of. I was just there, just vibes, right? Anyways, so now upon graduating, I had a really difficult time finding a role in computer science. That was my major. So I ended up going to a boot camp. And this is back when, I guess, 2016, I think before like the major boot camp push for everyone, which I now feel like it's honestly moderately predatory, which is going to lead into my question. But I feel like that opportunity that I took, a lot of my friends were in banking, working at JPMC, working at Bank of America, making like 80, 90K right out of college. And my opportunity was for, I think, like $45,000 or $50,000. And I was like, you know what? I'm 22 years old. I don't have kids. I don't have like anything to pay for. Like, I'm going to just do it, right? I spoke to a lot of people. They found like I was underselling myself or something like that. Duke graduates, of course. But either way, I was able to turn that boot camp into an opportunity to teach at that boot camp, right? Significantly increased my skill set, my money, and then ended up working at Meta. But that's only because I sort of took a chance on something that I, did the research to make sure it was credible and worked my hardest. And then I ended up like really changing my career over in 3 years. But that being said, whenever I talk about my experience, I find that I have to give a little caveat about boot camps. Not to bring up like stuff that's happened on Twitter or anything like that, but there was even recently a Black-owned boot camp that was incredibly, let's just say, shady. And a lot of people, especially Black people, are now upset because it seems like you can't even trust our own people with boot camps, right? So how do you, as someone who deals with hiring, who deals with looking at tons of people's backgrounds and things like that, do you feel like boot camps are worth it right now?
Yeah, sad to hear that. I didn't hear about that, and that really sucks. And I hate to hear that, particularly when it's from our own people. Look, boot camps are very, very important. I mean, a lot of companies are hiring new grad talent, or just like we'll just say junior engineers, for example, or entry level, what we'll call. And a lot of times they're not necessarily hanging themselves on the experience, years of experience doing the work, but more so like the skills, the potential to be able to do the job. Can you actually code successfully, for example? If you could demonstrate that in a technical interview, you have an opportunity to potentially land yourself in one of these companies. And so I do think that we shouldn't undervalue the boot camps and what they provide to potential candidates who are looking for opportunities, because that's like going to a post-secondary school, quite frankly. In many ways, you're getting it within an accelerated time frame. And so I think you definitely should do your research, of course, on the history of those boot camps, understanding what they're going to provide to you as far as your ROI, but also understanding, of course, their credibility as well too, so you don't run into the situation like you just highlighted, for example. And I know that there's a lot of great ones out there. I mean, a lot of great ones that we actually own and we lead. So I definitely encourage you to definitely do a boot camp. We even had one for Netflix. We have one called our Pathways Boot Camp, which we actually had. It's like an 8-week program. We had several schools, including a couple of HBCUs, Norfolk State, Morgan State, a few others that I can't think of off the top of my head right now. But very much intentional. Again, trying to go on campus and help individuals learn how to not only code, but also how to actually do a software engineer job. And then ultimately, through that boot camp graduation, and also with them graduating from school, we would actually hire some of that talent for some of our entry level roles within engineering. And so, yes, they're valuable. You definitely should do it. And I think it's just a matter of just making sure you get into the right one that has some credibility. Look at their history. Look at individuals who graduated from there. And also, by the way, you should connect with them as well too, right? So those folks who have graduated from some of these boot camps, LinkedIn them, connect with them as well, pick their brain to see how they can also help you access some of these open opportunities.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, I'm gonna definitely follow up with you about everything Netflix later. One of my best friends works there, and she has a blast. Actually, she has a really good time working there. It seems like a really healthy work-life balance once you get settled. Mm-hmm. So speaking of work-life balance, and also, the fact that we all know for people who are Scandal fans, gotta work twice as hard, right? How do you feel, especially since you're so VP and you're so senior in your roles, how do you feel like you best set yourself apart outside of course, just working really hard, but how did you set yourself apart from your other, I guess, colleagues, especially as a Black man in the space?
Yeah, I think in so many ways for me, I would say that my leadership skills definitely helped me land the opportunities that I've had over time, quite frankly. And if I go back to school, so if I'm going to talk to some folks who might be just, entering the marketplace, you'll think about your experiences and be like, well, I don't have a lot of experiences. I haven't worked yet, if you will, et cetera. But you think about your either your boot camp experience or your college experience, what are some of those leadership skills you've been able to demonstrate, whether it's leading clubs or organizations or even projects, things of that nature? And how do you make it stand out on your resume? How do you make it stand out on your LinkedIn? A lot of times I think we just, we don't think about the value that a lot of things we take on actually provide to us and make us stand out. So you might be I'll use me for an example, right? And so, you think about I'm doing recruiting work, right? So I'm trying to help us diversify our candidate pools a little bit more, get more Black and brown talent to your organization. And I do that through providing a lot of strategy. I'm influencing leaders, VPs within engineering, VPs within product management and other organizations. And so when I present my credentials, I talk about that. I talk about my leadership influencing other leaders, and I call it out. And a lot of times you might just have your resume say, oh, I'm just recruiting talent, for example. And that's what everybody does. Everybody, if a recruiter recruits, that's what they do. But the influence, it's those selling skills, it's those other intangibles that make you stand out. We typically don't call out on our resume. We don't call out enough, if you want to say. So what makes you unique is very different between you and me and others. However, if there are certain things that you're doing that other people are not doing, you should definitely call it out. For me, it was the leadership skills. For you, it might be I'm able to manage projects that are above my skill level. So meaning you might be working on some senior leadership projects, but yet they have you titled. And if they have you titled as a junior title, you're probably on the level, by the way. That's a whole other level. That's a whole other story to talk about. Okay. But essentially, I think it's just a matter of you have to understand what really works for you and also what makes you stand out amongst the bunch. But I would go beyond just those basic skill sets that you see on a job description. So don't just focus on able to code and able to project manage, but what else can you do? How do you make this role be you?
Mhm.
Like, how do you make it be your authentic self? So you can even talk about your ERG impact if you lead any of the employee resource groups, right? Or if you're, you're volunteering in the community, for example, you're doing text giving, for example. Like, these are things that I think are the intangibles that oftentimes we don't probably sell and talk about on our resume, that I think make us stand out.
Absolutely. At Meta, the way that they monitored, or I guess assessed engineers, it was a four axes. So engineering excellence, impact, direction, and people. And honestly, I feel like that sort of I overlap into my life. As far as, okay, am I making sure that I'm using all of my skill sets to make me like this unique person in the workspace?
Mhm.
And definitely like entering a software engineering role at a FANG company as a Black woman, I made sure that my people access was always like stellar. Spoke on panels, did diversity recruiting, of course, like I mentioned to you, the camp and things like that. And I feel like it's important for us to do these things. But what are your opinions or your thoughts on people who are in these roles, sort of feeling like, I'm not sure if you felt this way, but I feel like you kind of did say that you do. Like this unspoken rule that as a Black person in these spaces, you gotta do diversity work. You gotta do all these
Yeah.
things. And, it's like it's this weird sense of obligation. But sometimes my manager even told me, he was like, "Well, Genesis, you gotta focus on other stuff because like you're doing panels every month." So how do you feel like we should release ourselves of that unspoken obligation, but also still make sure we do it?
Yeah, this is a tough one. Yeah, I plus one what Lauren just put in the chat here about just
It's heavy.
how heavy it is. Yeah, it's heavy. It's real heavy. And I'll go back to my Facebook days, aka Meta days, and I was on a diversity team supporting our Black and Latinx ERGs. And I will say that this is probably one of the things we struggle with quite a bit. And we struggle with it because it was inherently you want to do the work. It's just what we do as a people. It's just we know we want to show up and support each other. We're gonna go out there and try to hire as many of us as we can. We're going to support one another. We're going to fellowship together. We're going to do all these great things because that's what we do as a people. At the same time, if it's not your day in day out responsibility, um, it's not only heavy, but it's also a struggle to balance because in many ways we tend to lean a little bit heavier into that work and
Mhm.
wanting to to drive the ERGs and hire help hire other folks that look like us, for example, and still doing great work. But sadly, a lot of times it's not viewed that way, and I think that that's one challenge that we got to figure out how do we solve for to ensure that leaders and other members of your team recognize that you're able to balance the two worlds and still be a really dope engineer. So that's something we got to talk about at some point. But to your question, though, I think that you have to, again, I'm going to throw it back to you, all the folks here who are watching, like you have to recognize how much you could take on. You don't want to burn out. You don't want to burn out trying to do this work. It's heavy. It's heavy enough in regards to just trying to do your own job, quite frankly. So I think you have to find that balance of recognizing like how much do you want to give back, how much can you take on, and know that you don't have to do it all at once. You can do it over time. So prioritize your time. That's one thing you absolutely should do is prioritize your time because we need to make sure we're taking care of us first. And we don't need none of y'all burning out. Mental health is important. So let's make sure we do that. So I think, you think about the whole year. So Q1, I want to do X, Y, and Z. Q2, I'm going to do, X, Y, and Z. Don't overdo it. Don't over engineer what you are thinking about doing so you don't burn out. So I think that's one thing. The other thing is, I do think that there needs to be more recognition, straight up. Like there is so much that you put into this work that a lot of times I don't feel like it's valued because the recognition isn't there. I'm not talking about monetary, but like elevating your overall role and responsibilities. Also, obviously, the financial incentives, of course, as well too. And I think it's something that when I was at Facebook, I did a lot of. Like I would write, we have performance reviews, and I wrote more than 20 plus performance reviews every half for my ERG leaders, amplifying their impact and helping to support Black and Brown people with their employee experience, but also the recruiting experience. And I did it because it was important to me, but also I wanted them to be recognized. And guess what? Many of those folks got promoted. Many of those folks got more money. And also they have gone on to other companies who have also left and are like thriving in many other roles and responsibilities, and also still, by the way, recruiting more Black and brown people for us.
Wow.
So the bottom line is, I think if we're able to, like, you being able to balance your time with it, you also getting the recognition, I think between those two, if we get that right, it should work pretty well. And note that we can't stop doing it, y'all. I know that sometimes it's heavy, I get it, but we can't. If we don't do it, who else gonna do it? They're gonna talk it, they ain't gonna do it.
Absolutely. That's
Again,
wonderful.
I'm just keeping it real, y'all. Just keeping it real.
Yeah, and you see Io in the comments, he's validating. He was like, he's one of these people. And I think it's so wonderful. It's wonderful that as you begin networking and you meet people like yourself, you can start seeing patterns and things like that of people's actions, and definitely speak or doing things more than they're speaking about it, and also still not like maintaining an air of humility, right? Where it's not like, well, I'm the reason why people got a job, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm saying? Because you do find people who are like that. So it's wonderful to see that you're impacting the community. We spoke about layoffs briefly, of course, with myself. So I want to just, I guess, go back to the beginning of my list of questions here.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure if Tina's going to be able to join. The talk is almost over. That being said, I want to make sure that people who have questions, if you want to hit the Q&A, go ahead and feel free to ask questions to myself and or Willie, specifically Willie and or me probably. Okay, so let's go back. I want to talk about layoffs, and if you feel like there has been a sort of, at least from what you've seen, one, are you on the inside of layoffs? Actually, I don't think Netflix has been affected.
We have.
Yeah, they have?
Yeah, earlier this year, like May and I think it was May and June. We had, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, Tina, we really miss you on this talk, but thank you for watching so far. And actually, if people want to ask Tina questions in the chat,
yeah.
I can give you a little bit about her. So Tina is a senior technical recruiter at Uber. She's responsible for strategically sourcing and attracting top product managers across different verticals, including Eats, Mobility, Marketplace, and Uber for Business. She works closely with candidates throughout the interview process to optimize their experience engaging with Uber stakeholders while also highlighting their best and most relevant skills. She has over 7 years of recruiting experience and is dedicated to promoting diversity and inclusion. So please reach out to her. She's been actively trying to rejoin the session. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties, but she's here and she's ready. So thank you for joining. But back to the chat so far, I wanted to know if you've seen anything that may give a signal that layoffs are disproportionately affecting Black people. I think that for me, obviously, being Black, having a lot of Black friends, that's my network, right? So I'm seeing a lot of Black people being laid off, and a lot of people who I spoke to feel like it's a little bit suspicious. Or is this just, proximity?
Yeah, I think it's more proximity. To be honest with you, first off, this has been really it's been really tough. Hearing your story. Of course, many of my good friends have also been impacted at a number of different companies. Seen some of them at a couple different conferences, and it's just like, wow, this is just sad. And so yes, I do think, because like you just said, because of the proximity, we definitely feel like it's definitely a lot more Black people perhaps that are being impacted by these companies' decisions. But I do think we look at the overall numbers, it's probably it's probably on par with how perhaps the representation of these companies look, to be honest with you. So I don't think it's necessarily disproportionate. I think it's just more of our proximity. However, with that being said, I do think that it still impacts us disproportionately as it relates to the internal representation, because we obviously are sadly a smaller number of that employee population. So a certain number of us are let go. You look at the internal representation post that event, it's probably even less now. And that's really probably more the pain point, quite frankly, because, well, the pain point is on both sides. But you think about just the work that we've done, the work that we talked about earlier in this session, for example, all the boot camps and just the recruiting, the intentional recruiting and so forth, in many ways is going to waste. And I hate to put it like that, but it just feels that way, because it's like, I got all these great people to get in the door, and fast forward, many of them have been let go, and that really sucks, So I do think that it puts us back in many ways, of course. And now it's like, how do we kind of regain that momentum? And I feel like tech sadly has, you call it the Holy Grail earlier, for example. Like I feel like it's diminishing a tad, just a
Mm-hmm.
tad bit. I think we'll regain it at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it has become a little bit more of a interesting area to recruit for because there's less opportunities now. Does that actually help or hurt us?
Right.
Because you think about bias, you think about like just you highlighted, I think the applicant pool being a lot more now, and so how do you really keep the pulse on ensuring that we're being intentional about our efforts to increase representation through less opportunities?
Mm-hmm. Definitely agree with you. Um, I feel like not only is it just entering the workspace, but of course it's keeping that role and it's excelling in those roles. I feel like for a long time at work I was trying my hardest. I was fighting for my life in there, and it got to the point where definitely experienced burnout. But have you heard of the Sunday Scaries before?
No, tell me more.
So Sunday scare is just basically like when you just have tons of anxiety about work starting the next day, right? So I felt like after a while I started to have those on Saturday nights. Like I'd be out with my friends having a good time on Saturday, and then like towards the end of the night I get sad because that means Sunday's coming, which meant Monday is coming, which is crazy,
Mm,
right? And then layoffs happen, and of course I was meeting expectations for my job. I was never really excelling, and I'm used to excelling in my work thus far, so it was definitely difficult. But I would say layoffs couldn't have happened in a better time for me personally. But upon layoffs happening, how would you say people can start preparing for re-entering the workforce? Slash, with all these people who are joining, there's lots of people who want to pivot into tech, but of course, with tons of layoffs happening, that just means the job applicant pool is going to be incredibly oversaturated.
mhm.
Now that we're running out of time a little bit, can you give us some do's and don'ts for, like, let's say LinkedIn? Because I definitely feel like having recruiters reach out to you can put you a lot farther ahead than you applying to a role, right? So how can
Hmm.
people sort of prepare themselves and make their internet footprint sort of
Yeah.
as polished as possible?
Yeah, and I apologize. The time went so fast. Gosh.
Mhm.
So real quick, I think one, you want to make sure again your LinkedIn stands out. So highlighting your skills, your experiences, what you have really done over the years, but focus on the impact. The impact, I think, is what a lot of recruiters are looking for. Is like, okay, tell me a little bit more about. I see the role and responsibilities, but what's been your impact? So highlight a lot of your impact on your LinkedIn if you can. That I think is going to be something that'll help you stand out. I again go back to the networking piece. Like there's power in networking, and so like you want to make sure you connect with your network, their network. Your network has a network, and I think that helps out as well too. Like let's find out. Matter of fact, we should just quite frankly, I don't know what the plan is, but we should definitely get like a I don't know, a database or something, right? Of this like connections at all these different tech companies,
Mhm.
and who can definitely get our people in front of people. That would be really dope. Actually, it'd be really cool if we had that. So let's, because I've seen the layoff list floating around for all these different companies. That's cool, but obviously it doesn't identify you as you black women, for example, or black man.
Mhm.
But if we had our own thing, we could definitely kind of float that and connect with our people who are still at these companies and try to help us get in the door quickly. Because hiring is still happening, y'all, at a lot of different companies. And a lot of what I've seen is that they're trying to accelerate people who have been laid off, who have been impacted. And so we should definitely try to take advantage of that. Then the
Mhm.
final thing I'll say really quickly is there are conferences that will continue to happen. Like Techsgiving, for example. There'll be other company conferences throughout the year, next year in 2023, like Afrotech, Dev Color and Motion, for example. There's so many conferences where companies again will be that will be present, and so definitely I would say if you have the opportunity to check out some of these conferences, go to them, and again network, get in front of these companies, and I think that will help you stand out when it comes to your opportunities.
That's awesome. So, okay, I think we have 2 minutes
Yes, render
before.
ATL. Sorry, my bad. How could I forget render
Oh,
ATL? They're gonna kill me for that one.
that's funny. Yeah, Render ATL is great. I actually spoke at their conference this past year. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so quick two-part question. One is, how can people get involved in Netflix's internal programs? And two, do you have any like final words of advice for our audience, and ways that they can get in contact with you and help support you for any ventures? So I mean, that's three parts.
Yeah, just drop my LinkedIn in the chat, so definitely hit me up. It is a little backed up, so it might be a little minute before I get to you, but I will definitely connect with you. Um, I would say that there's my advice on you real quick, I'm gonna jump to that real fast, I think is, don't give up. Like there's opportunity out there for you. It might be a little bit more work than what you probably are used to doing, but again, lean on your networks, leverage those folks, go to these conferences, stay connected. These companies, like I said, companies are hiring. So definitely make sure you apply. If you don't apply, they can't even check for you. So definitely make sure you're applying. If you have folks who can refer you, definitely make sure you utilize the referral opportunity as well. And then from we're hiring at Netflix, by the way, too. So definitely have roles that I can talk to you more about as well, too. So happy to share more insight on that. And then what was the other item I needed to touch on?
Oh, if you have any like business venture or basically anything outside of Netflix that you would like support for, just plug yourself.
Yeah. I'm just kind of like the corporate guy. I mean, other than outside of work, this is like it for me. I mean, I coach baseball, basketball, football for my boys. So if anybody wants to volunteer here in Atlanta, I'm happy to get some more folks to help out with that. But yeah, beyond that, I'm just kind of like Netflix recruiting pretty much all day. That's me.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to go too far over time because I know there's lots of things going on, but thank you all for joining. Again, sorry for the technical difficulties. Hope you learned a little bit. And please, actually, it's one thing I wanted to mention towards your point about the database for, people. Join our Discord. We're definitely going to be, of course, as TextGiving grows, we're going to be incorporating new things, and we would love to have more people in our tribe/community who can help out. So thank you all for joining, and looking forward to my next chat tomorrow. Okay? Talk to you guys later.
Thank you so much, Genesis. Thanks, everyone.